really good, and that's not bad.
Wreck-It Ralph is one of Disney's most heroic characters in recent memory. Not only is he kind towards those less fortunate than him, he also doesn't want to be a bad guy. Unlike many other heroes, Ralph isn't designed to be good. Rather, he's constructed to be the wrathful villain of an old arcade game.
Hey, you moved my stump!
Because of this, he's naturally got a bit of a temper, and he tends to break everything he touches.
Everybody!
But that's just because of the way that he was programmed. And of course, his huge hands and great strength don't help in making him feel any less imposing. But beneath his outwardly formidable appearance, Ralph is a big old softy on the inside. Not only does he have a gentle and caring nature, he's also courageous and patient. We watch him fight odd after odd in his mission to be recognized as a hero. That's right, Ralph is a Disney character who's designed to be an antagonist, but who rejects the role.
But here's the thing. I don't want to be the bad guy anymore.
He doesn't do it exactly. I mean, he doesn't leave the game. Rather, he revolutionizes the way that video game characters interact with each other, not just in his game, but in other games too.
And let's just say, some tears were shed.
No, it wasn't me. His journey resonated deeply with all of us. The arc of this character allowed us to tap into some deep innate desires we have for friendship, love, and belonging. It showed us the power of being good, made us realize that we are all in control of our own life, and it showed us to treasure what really matters. So let's do an in-depth analysis of Ralph's character. We'll explore the complexities of this great protagonist, everything that lies beneath the surface, and why I personally believe that he wasn't just the best protagonist for the movie, but also one of the most endearing heroes in all of animated cinema. Let's get into that by first taking a look at the fictional universe where all of this takes place. The setting of Wreck-It Ralph is a treat to witness and behold, and it's not just because of all the candy. This movie takes place in an arcade studio, a hustling, bustling site of joy where children push at buttons in consoles to get video game characters to do things. I reminisced about my childhood a little bit when I heard the coins clank into the machines. We raced cars, we fought wars, it was beautiful. But beyond the arcade center at play, the video game characters have their own lives going on. They bond with each other over group meetings, they throw parties that their friends can attend, and they have homes to go back to when the day is over. Except these little guys, of course. The video games are connected by what appears to be a huge transit hallway. This center comes complete with its own security detail, because you can't go from one video game to the next. No, that's called going turbo, and if you do that, the game gets unplugged.
You can't mess with the program, Ralph.
You're not going turbo, are you?
See, there is a program at play in this world. All characters are designed with specific qualities. These features overlay their archetype. For each video game that a character is designed for, they will either get to be the villain or the hero. There are bystanders, of course, but they're just props to make the game more interesting. What's more interesting than the idea of the villain versus hero archetype is what Ralph decides to do with it. And this is the very thing that makes Wreck-It Ralph such a wonderful protagonist. He challenges the dichotomy of good and evil. Ralph showed us that just because we were born a certain way doesn't mean that we need to stay that way for the rest of our lives. And then he also goes on to show us that our true composition, that which we are really made of, is the same thing that our heart wants. Ralph's heart, like I said, desires to be a hero, and it's because he already is one. He just doesn't see it yet. But how did a guy who was programmed to be a villain naturally be such a good egg? I'll tell you what I think about that. But first, let's take a look at the other characters. The other bad guys in the arcade hold get-togethers called Bad Anon meetings. This is the only place where Ralph is welcome, but we find out at the start of the movie that he doesn't like to go there. Ralph doesn't feel at home around the other villains, and I think that none of these guys is actually content with being a bad guy. Why else would they hold these meetings? It's clear that they're trying to get a weight off of their chests. The difference between Ralph and them, though, is this. Ralph is the only one to say out loud the fact that he doesn't want to be a bad guy, and what's more is he actually does something about it. While the other bad guys sit around and low-key complain about their lives, Ralph chooses a different path. He has an innate belief in himself, and he acts on it. For this reason, he dares to go forward into the party that Felix is throwing. Felix is the good guy, so everyone naturally likes him. That's why all the characters of Ralph's game are busy attending Felix's party. It's the video game's 30th anniversary, so one would think that they'd want all the characters to be there. But Ralph, they're all a bit scared of him. He's big and strong and muscular, and because he's supposed to be the bad guy, they've never really gotten to know him. In this way, the film dives into the concept of how many people accept predestined ideas. Another idea that Wreck-It Ralph explores is the concept of condescension towards that which you fear. We see an example of this with Norwood, who is a Nicelander that's not very nice. He's condescending towards Ralph at the start of the movie because he doesn't think that Ralph fits in with them. From a psychological standpoint, condescension typically stems from either envy or fear. While it makes sense for a side character to be envious of Ralph, who at least gets to get the game going, I think that the Nicelanders are really just terrified. They don't know who he is, and that's why being close to him is unsettling for them. None of the Nicelanders wanted Ralph at the party, but Norwood was the one to go ahead and say it. He also voices his opinion that he doesn't think that Ralph could ever be a hero.
I could be a good guy if I wanted to, and I could win a medal.
And when you do, come and talk to us.
This theme of condescension is also observed with Vanellope, who wants to be a racer, but the characters in her game think otherwise.
Oh no, I glitched too!
In Vanellope's case, the other racers are condescending towards her due to the little girl's strong sense of herself. Since they don't have a reason to be afraid of her, I mean, she doesn't compete with them, these girls bullying the child can only suggest that they're a little scared of how brave she is. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to know what you think about that. The parallels drawn between Vanellope and Ralph also further accentuate Ralph's innate goodness. It was also through this relationship that the writers managed to showcase the complexity of Ralph's character and further strengthen the impact of the film's message, which made it such a brilliant movie because it fights the idea that good and evil are inherent and elaborates on themes of kindness. I can't keep saying this enough. One isn't who they are because of what role they were assigned, but rather because of how they choose to act. And throughout the film, we watch characters acting in unkind and sometimes even nefarious ways. But the real hero is the one that has always been good on the inside. And that is what makes Ralph so wholesome. But if Ralph was always inherently a good person on the inside, why did he want to get a medal for it? What made this character embark on a dangerous journey to show others that he too could be a hero? I'll explain that in a bit. First, I would like to learn your opinions about Ralph's best friend, Vanellope von Schweetz. I thought that she was adorable but could be a little annoying at times. Do you think her glitch was caused by King Candy's meddling in her program, or was she designed to be that way from the start? Please do drop a comment below. So now that we've started a discussion on that, let's try to understand why Ralph left Fix-It Felix for the treacherous realms of Hero's Duty, starting with his backstory. Ralph is a retro video character which in his own words means old but cool. Having been programmed to be a villain, he breaks things and Felix fixes them. But in the first scene where Ralph introduces himself, he doesn't sound quite sure of who he is.
My name's Ralph, and I'm a bad guy.
He definitely doesn't want to be this person, which I've covered before. I mean, sure, his character as the game's antagonist has had a good run. Children have loved it for decades, but he's a bit tired of the act. And it's not because he's bad at his job. With his formidable height and weight and that forceful appearance, he's the perfect person to break things. It's just that he wants something else now. Something he's wanted for a long time. He's been trying hard to be happy with what he has. On top of that, Ralph lives in the garbage. He sometimes sneaks off to Pac-Man's game and collects cherries, but even that's not good enough anymore. Ralph wants praise and recognition. He wants to be patted on the back for a job well done every now and then. Ralph is hurt when he's not invited to a party in the honor of the 30th anniversary of his game. He decides that if he were to win a medal, people would celebrate him too. They already celebrate Felix. Ralph wants just a tiny taste of that.
Now you're just being ridiculous. Only good guys win medals. And you, sir, are no good guy.
Ralph's desire is antithetical to his programming, but the manner in which he comes to terms with this fact is what makes him the lovable protagonist that we cherish to this day. His transition from feeling stuck and dissatisfied to content and whole definitely taught us a great deal, and it all stemmed from his core desires, which all of the other characters misunderstood. They couldn't relate to what he wanted because they had never been in his shoes, or lack thereof, might I say. I'm sure that you at least will feel as though you can relate to them. About 15 minutes into the film, it's established that the only way for Ralph to break free from a life that he's not happy with is for him to win a medal. So he ventures into hero's duty and gets one. The medal is locked up high in a building, but Ralph already has experience with those. In fact, he climbs and breaks them every single day. Despite his adeptness at the task at hand, though, the task is still pretty challenging. I mean, obviously, it's a whole other world. So of course, the medal is important to Ralph.
It's mine, it's precious to me. Well, that thing it's my ticket to a better life.
But it's more than that. Ralph's underlying motive behind getting the medal is not to be declared a hero. He doesn't care about name and fame. While he does want to be admired and appreciated, it's not an all-consuming desire. And I thought that the only reason it was there in the first place is because he's so tired of the monotony of Fix-It Felix. Ralph's real motive is something else, and it's this that makes him so much more lovable and relatable. But what is it? See, another reason that makes Ralph such a good protagonist is that he's not simplistic. From the outset, we watch him pursue a tangible thing. On the inside, there's more for us to see.
Question, Ralph. We've been asking you to Badenon for years now, and tonight you finally show up.
Ralph is a sensitive guy, and it's clear that he loves his game, but it's getting repetitive now, like a day on an endless loop. Now, as I've mentioned before, Ralph could just go to Badenon meetings and complain about the setting of his game, but he says something else entirely.
If I'm really honest with myself, I see Felix up there, getting patted on the back.
Here, we see Ralph look up at the penthouse with longing. He sees the way that the Nicelanders cherish Felix, and it unveils his motive. Ralph just wants to be included. He just wants to feel loved. And that struck a chord with every single one of us. This is especially evident when he brings the medal home, gets the keys to the penthouse, and is absolutely miserable there.
I don't know, I was just tired of living alone in the garbage.
When we see Ralph's character arc at play, it gives us hope. It shows us that we too can find contentment, fulfillment, peace, and love. This makes him a great protagonist, one that inspires us to chase after our dreams. Because even if we don't end up getting the exact thing that we want, the process in itself will cause us to grow. Ralph does find what he's looking for, but as is often the case with life, it's not in the way that he expected. This is because at the start of the film, there's a part of him that is missing. And the process of growth that he assigns to himself when he embarks on the hero's journey helps him find that part. Not only does he find friendship like the one Felix has with the Nicelanders, he also finds something else. Something that every single one of us needs. In this way, Disney used this classic character development arc to deeply touch our heartstrings. To understand this, let's roll back to the entrance scene. While I'm quite sure that you all would already know this, taking another glance will help put my point into perspective. We first see Ralph in his video game form, where he climbs to the top of a building and begins smashing it to bits. While the character on the screen is violent and imposing, the narrator's voice, which is Ralph's, is warm and conversational. And it's actually somewhat funny, but he doesn't seem quite sure of himself. There are a lot of uhs and ums, and most of his statements are actually questions. But then he comes out and says it outright.
It becomes kind of hard to love your job when no one seems to like you for doing it.
Then we see him in person for the first time, and he's lying in the mud. He's trying very hard to point out that he's grateful for his life. He's not spiteful at all. But what makes this character such a beautifully written protagonist is the sacrifice that he makes. And that exactly is what changes his life. See, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what completes us all is the process of self-actualization. It means to fulfill one's true potential. Ralph had the innate potential to be a hero all along. That was why he was kind to Q*bert. He was also trying to help out Vanellope. At the start, though, his interest was instrumental. He wanted to get the medal back. Later, his interest shifted to intrinsic. He tried to give up his life so that he could save Vanellope's. Because this was founded in his core self, the process gave him fulfillment. And that's when he delivered his iconic dialogue about not being good and that not being bad. Ralph managed to grasp the true complexity that lies beneath the surface of a false dichotomy. Outward traits are irrelevant. What truly makes us who we are is what we choose to do. Being a wonderful friend to Vanellope gave Ralph a wonderful friend for life, and what makes him an even better protagonist is that he earned this treasure rather than having it from the very get-go. Ralph's innate goodness of spirit gave him one more thing. This transformed the worst part of his day, getting thrown off the roof. Can you guess what it is?
Because when the Nicelanders lift me up, I get a perfect view of Sugar Rush.
See, Ralph is happy to see his friend winning at what she loves to do. The fact that she looks over at him and waves is simply enough for him. He's not just at the receiving end of love, but also at the origin of it. Seeing this really touched me. In this way, Wreck-It Ralph really focused on the power of love and friendship. None of us is supposed to power through life alone, regardless of our place in life. Having a strong sense of community gives us immense power, and it makes everything worth the struggle, which is what Ralph is trying to teach us. He might have been programmed to be a bad guy, but for everyone from the homeless characters he helped out to Vanellope von Schweetz, and even us, Ralph will forever be a hero. But why did Ralph have to go out there and make such a big deal about changing his life? One would think that, like all the other bad guys, he would just accept his fate. Nobody else seemed to want to run off into another video game, steal a medal, and try to be called a hero. Except, of course, Turbo, the villain of the film. If you're interested in hearing more about him, watch my other video going over him. Just don't blame me too much for the repetition in that video. I was still honing my craft. Anyways, back to Ralph, where we can discuss if he ever really was a villain. After all, wasn't the very act of stealing a medal a bad thing on Ralph's part? I mean, it was done with the intention to be declared a good guy. Should he be forgiven for that? I'm waiting to hear your thoughts on that. But before you give me your opinions, I'd like to give my 2 cents on this one. As a video game character who is made to be the bad guy, Ralph breaking apart buildings is excused. It's his job, he can't help it. And the only reason he accidentally breaks some things is that he's simply too big and strong. So none of this made him quintessentially a bad guy. But of course, you all already knew that. A nuance to his character, though, is that in the beginning of the movie, he wants so badly to be welcomed by the Nicelander gang that he's ready to steal a medal from another game. Ralph also happens to steal cherries from Pac-Man's game. This is depicted when he refuses to declare them to the security officer. Personally, I thought that Ralph's petty theft was excusable. To begin with, he lives in the garbage, and Ralph only goes to Pac-Man's game in order to blow off steam. The cherries that he collects are undeclared and nobody has any use for them. I mean, Pac-Man's not going to eat them, so why should Ralph not take them? But then he goes on to give them to Q*bert. This shows us for the first time in the film how kind Ralph is on the inside. I certainly started admiring him there. Next, he goes on to steal a medal. While the medal doesn't rightfully belong to him by virtue of its setting, Ralph still makes an effort to get it. And taking it doesn't do any permanent damage. At least, none that Ralph intended to do. The theft of the medal, while huge, makes sense when we examine it in juxtaposition to the film's antagonist. King Candy stole Vanellope's rightful place as monarch of the game, and he only did it for power. He wanted to remain relevant for long after his game's plug had been pulled. I've already elaborated on why Ralph wanted the medal, and I don't think we can hate him for that. When he accidentally transports a Cybug to Sugar Rush, he does try to kill it at first. And near the end of the movie, when the Cybug has multiplied, Ralph is ready to give his life to protect others from the damage. In this way, Ralph compensates for both acts of theft in a manner that matches their gravity. To be honest, Ralph himself doesn't feel comfortable seeing himself as the bad guy. That's why he's insistent on being seen as a hero. And in my opinion, maybe it's because the developers back in the day didn't care enough about a backstory. I mean, Sergeant Calhoun in her high-definition self is programmed with a backstory that makes her believe certain things. But Ralph and all of the characters in his game? Older graphics, less complexity. It's Ralph himself that brings complexity into all of this, and that's why we love him so much. So I think that Ralph was never a bad guy. He might get a little angry sometimes, and he might have terrible breath, but he was always a good person on the inside. After all, we all have our flaws. It just makes us more human. So now we've covered most of his character, Ralph was surely an inspiration, not just to you and me, but also to all the bad guys in the arcade. He taught all of us that life can be more than what we see before us. He inspired us to strive for better. Life can get droll, restrictive, and generally unsatisfactory for all of us. It's bound to happen at one point or another, and a lot of us can't control what's happening to us, but we can choose what to do with it. Through Ralph, we were able to learn to self-assign the hero's journey. But the way that Ralph showed this is endearingly humble, and we can't help but relate to him. We might not be able to change the entirety of our circumstances, but we can surely make them better. In the end of the film, that's what Ralph did by building a shack. And because his sweet nature won over everyone in his video game, Felix helped him do it. Ralph reiterated a core Disney message to us: have courage and be kind. But he did it in a clumsy, unpretentious, and comical way. And that is why he feels like such a warm character. Ralph's unpretentiousness further allows us to connect deeply with him, and that is why we're all the more inspired when he gets what he wants. And that is what makes him a perfect protagonist. I do wish he would put on a pair of shoes though, but I guess they can't find them in his size. No, I'm just kidding, it's actually got to do with his character design. While we normally don't know how tall a character is exactly or how many pounds they weigh, Ralph tells us in the very first dialogue.
I'm 9 feet tall. I weigh 643 pounds. Got a little bit of a temper on me.
Other than his huge size, Ralph has brown hair and eyes. This makes him feel warmer and kinder. The orange shirt under his torn overalls shows a spark and a passion for life. And the torn overalls, well, that hints at how he's being neglected by the characters in his game. I know I said I wish he'd wear them, but Ralph's bare feet point toward his openness of spirit. He's approachable, he's unguarded, he's not hiding anything. He's just always himself, raw brute strength and all. Understanding Ralph's character design goes a long way into understanding how to write a protagonist like him. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, I'd like to begin to explain how he was written so that you too can create a wholesome, lovable brute who reminded me a little bit of Sullivan from Monsters, Inc., who can move people to tears. Before I go into that though, I'd like to point out one more thing. Not only did Ralph help the homeless people and Vanellope, who was actually also homeless, he also may have helped Felix find his girl. I mean, think about it. If Ralph hadn't gone to hero's duty and Felix hadn't followed him, he would never have met Calhoun. And if Ralph hadn't zipped off to Sugar Rush, the now married couple would never have gotten the time to get to know each other. Ralph didn't mean to do this, but I still think he deserves a little credit. No? Too much? Moving on. Ralph from Wreck-It Ralph was surely created with care and effort, and while he may have been one of Disney's most complex protagonists in a PG film, recreating someone like him is actually surprisingly simple. Wreck-It Ralph is a combination of kindness, courage, and passion. However, these core elements can be played around in a variety of ways to write someone like Ralph. So without wasting time, let's dive right into the step-by-step method to write the perfect protagonist. The reason we felt so connected to Ralph was because we connected deeply with his motive, because we want to feel love and belonging. We wished and hoped for the same for him. This worked especially well when he achieved his goal and inspired us to do the same. Playing his kindness and courage into this was also a great way to get us rooting for him. Nobody likes a sourpuss, because Ralph was so passionate about what he wanted and was ready to break rules and put in the work to get it, it made us cheer him on all the more. I know I've mentioned this before, but I'd like to break it down for you. The fact that Ralph's core desire was antithetical to his programming was critical to his character development. The conflict allowed him to learn new things. Placing seemingly insurmountable hurdles in the path of the protagonist is a great way to make the audience invested. If a character is inherently good and kind and easy to relate to, this makes us want to closely watch their journey. An audience cannot form a bond with a protagonist who is too perfect. This is especially noteworthy when Ralph is placed next to Felix, who is actually a good guy. Because Felix doesn't have any outward flaws, he actually came off as somewhat irrelevant. Even though he's decidedly nicer to Ralph than the rest of the crew, he's just not, you know what I mean. In the middle of the film, Ralph destroys Vanellope's race car. It's painful for him to do so because not only has he helped Vanellope build it, he also really doesn't want to hurt her. But he does it out of a need to protect her against a danger that she doesn't know about. At this point, Ralph has been manipulated by the evil King Candy, and because Ralph is simple and pure of heart, the plan works. What made Ralph so sweet for us to watch in general was that his appearance didn't match who was on the inside. Seeing a great big chunky guy be so compassionate and considerate of those around him was absolutely adorable. I would absolutely love to be around someone who cared so deeply for other people that he adopted them, brought them into their video game, and then built a home for them. And no, I wouldn't care if their breath was stinky or not, although I would perhaps give them a breath mint. Ralph represented the true ideals of taking accountability for your happiness, not just throughout the film, but also at the end. Here, we watched him build a shack because he was tired of living in the garbage. All in all, Wreck-It Ralph proved to us that we always have the power to improve our lives, readjust to make things more comfortable, and rise above our circumstances. I honestly think that Ralph was Disney's best protagonist till date. Through this character, they were able to erase a false dichotomy and empower others to lead their lives to the fullest. They were able to present a new idea of a happy life, beyond the traditional concepts of love and magic and castles. While other characters might have tried to brush this concept, I really think that Ralph hit the nail on the head, and he did it in a way that has locked him as a hero in our hearts forever. Turns out, he fulfilled that dream too. What did you like the most about Wreck-It Ralph? Was he your favorite character in the movie? For me, Vanellope was super cute, and her final car race had me perched on the edge of my seat. But this old giant ruled over my heart. Let me know what you thought of him in the comments below. I'd also love to see recommendations for other protagonists that you'd like for me to review. And as always, if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a nice one, folks. Bye.